Welcome to Talking with Famous People. I'm your host, Zachary. We have our host, Eric, Coffin Nailer
No,
Eric.
yeah, not host Eric today. Coffin nailer Eric.
Yeah,
Taking on
Coffin.
a job nailing coffins.
So, who is going to be put in the coffin, Eric? And what's the justification for the violence of putting them in, in said coffin?
Well, the justification is somebody who goes by the name of Metasoap is being very stubborn with me. And I have made about, but of course, listen, she's basically like controlling my life. So I mean, she should take some credit for that. I think must have made at least 6 or 7 videos about this today. Although I have only uploaded the one I just made most recently. I probably have better ones than the one I most recently made. But I just been making. I've been out and about during the day, and every time I make a video, it seems like I start off talking about whatever, and I end up talking yelling at Metasoap. So I don't know what to say about that.
So, uh, what, give me a little rerun of what's going on again. So I,
It
so for sure.
started with the DMV stuff. I said you shouldn't. The government does not need car registration fees to pay for roads, which is obviously true because they've got a million sources of revenue. They might have to cut something else maybe, but they definitely don't need those car registration fees to pay for roads with fucking countless sources of revenue. So she took exception to that. She said I couldn't make that claim without giving some numbers, showing some proof. And at that point, I said, well, you're missing the point entirely, which is, of course we could find. It would be impossible to prove the opposite of what I'm saying. It would be impossible to prove that we can't pay for the roads without violating rights.
Wait, I'm confused. So what's she asking for proof for exactly?
Well, I mean, I think she took exception to my dis, describing the roads as being very, very cheap, and they actually cost $6 billion a year. She pointed out, Eric, you said they cost almost nothing. They actually cost $6 billion a year. And I said, well, yeah, but when you're state of California, you're spending 140 billion a year, which
Oh,
is
was
what we're
that yeah?
spending in
Was that your
total.
point that hypothetically it would cost nothing if they were utilizing our taxes correctly?
Right. That
I
we
think I
don't
would agree with
need.
that.
They don't need to have this extra thing. Like, oh, you want us to do the roads too? Oh, well, then we're going to need to have car registration fees. What about all those other taxes? Right? This is my point. That we don't need those registration. You can't justify them by saying, well, we need them to pay for the roads. Everybody has a responsibility to chip in on the roads, don't they? I mean, we're already doing nothing but chipping in on shit. So why? That's not a way to justify it, is my point. Anyway, she got very fussy about this numbers thing. Kept coming back to these numbers. Like, you need to give us more numbers, more concrete data. It's just an opinion, she said at one point. As though binary impacts don't count as real impacts. That's the thing that's frustrating,
What do you
right?
mean by binary impacts?
Well, I point out right now people are being stolen from or extorted from or whatever. They're having money removed from them, right? Like I got a parking ticket in Manhattan Beach. It cost me $82. There's $82 it's being removed from me. It it doesn't matter if the total amount of parking ticket money being taken away by uh, registration sticker violations is huge or small. It doesn't matter. We're not talking about whether or not it's good or bad because it generates needful revenue or doesn't. If we were, then why don't we just all just go rob people's houses? Because if that's the criterion, like, well, we don't think about violence first. We think about whether it's going to get us a lot of money or not, whether we need the money. We think about that first, make that decision, then commit the violence, then consider whether the violence is a good idea or not. Why? What?
I see your point. But I mean, don't I feel like Metasoap is definitely justified though in asking for some data to support the claim. I mean,
Uh,
don't you think you could
which
provide
claim?
some? I guess.
Data for which claim?
Well, I guess first we would need to see some statistics on how much taxes are specifically taken from the citizens, and then I guess we can from
Okay,
there like.
we have we have that. It's 140 billion in California from all the revenue sources combined. About 6 billion spent on roads. Now, the biggest cost in California is schools, 46 billion, and then there's another 90 billion or so that goes to other stuff besides infrastructure and schools.
So what do you suggest that? What do you suggest we should take funding from to fund the roads instead of the if we were to eliminate the DMV? Okay, let me get this straight. The DMV licensing goes towards the roads. Is that right? Because I'm not sure about this.
That's the thing. I still don't even know if that's in fact the case. I believe
You would
I'm
like to think
giving,
that there is some like at least
yeah,
some
I'd like,
justification.
yeah, I'm giving the state of California credit and assuming that they have our registration fees earmarked for road related stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but I haven't actually established that. But I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. So either I'm right or it's even worse. It's
Yeah.
it's not like something that needs to be established for to make my case.
Yeah. So what would be what would you recommend be cut? What funding should be cut to go towards roads then to make it virtually no cost?
Well, I would end all funding for higher education. First of all, that's a substantial amount of the budget right there, or a good amount of
Higher
billions.
education?
Yeah, higher education. You do secondary. I mean, you do college first. Okay. California spends a lot of money on the UC system. They've cut way back. They're funding it less now. We need to fund it even less than that. Um, we need to stop funding college at all. Colleges are a lot of them are for profit. They're businesses. Why should the government be funding them? And when we do have public colleges, it's true, like the UC system or the Cal State system. My question is why?
Well, don't you think that a government would want its citizens educated? And I know the argument can be made that they're not educating us properly, but I mean, wouldn't that hypothetically be a good thing for a society to have education?
Okay, well, an educated society is preferable to an ignorant society for sure. And to the extent that it was necessary to, for location reasons, to have a centralized education room called a school, um, it made sense that the community as a whole would want to chip in on a teacher. And this happened all the time in the as people were homesteading and going out to the West. It was very commonplace for a community to have a schoolhouse. They all chip in to hire a teacher who comes out from the East Coast, and they pay that teacher, and she teaches all the children in the community. And it gets bigger than paying another teacher. Well, that eventually evolved into a unified school district. Once the state, however, the state level, instead of just local districts, now in California, the state is very much involved in public schools, and they give the public schools a lot of money. If it were purely a local affair, things would be way, way different. It would be a lot cheaper,
So
and
it seems like the
um,
issue, am I right in identifying that the issue you have with it is that we don't really have control over how much money we put into the school? Like we don't really have control over like if we were ultimately disappointed with how the education was going, we wouldn't have the option to kind of like, well, you're not getting any payment for teaching my children garbage, right? Is that the issue you have with it?
right. Well, I mean, first of all, there's multiple issues to have with it. If you think about one thing that the effect of a public education system has is that um, the best teachers have to lose a great deal of money to pay for the salaries of the ineffective teachers. In the private market, I don't have ineffective teachers.
Because
I can't.
they're kind of, if they aren't up to par with the competition, then they won't earn any money. That's what you're saying.
Right. And debate unique in education, along with maybe like academic decathlon stuff or other sort of like baby versions of debate, I guess, like Science Bowl and stuff like that. Things that are designed to be competitive, trying to bring a competition element in. They're not debate. There will always be vastly inferior as a pedagogy to debate because only debate trains people in the construction of multi-meta fractiverses. That's what we're doing, right? We're saying, look, here's how when somebody's making this argument, here's what they actually mean. They mean this framework. They're building it on this assumed framework. We know that's the case because of X. So this, and then you train them to say, look, when somebody does assume this framework or a utilitarian framework like Metasoap, that we should decide whether or not to use violence on people based on um, its efficiency as a in the status quo or something, or its cost benefit analysis on its functionality in the status quo.
So you
Uh,
view taxation as pretty much coercion, right? Would you consider all taxation? I think we've had this before, but just most of it for stuff that we don't need, right? That would be immoral.
well, I would say this: as a politician, my position is not to abolish all taxes. My position as a politician is to hopefully get rid of all things that call themselves something other than a tax, first of all. Because one of the first jobs of, of the cleanup team is going to be tasked with a lot of cleanup. I mean, there have been a family of hobos living up there 40 years, and there were all hoarders. And what they've been doing, instead of hoarding stuff, they've been hoarding pointless little assertions of power and authority. And, you clear those fuckers out of the light of day and some treason charges.
Well, see, what I'm worried about with or one of my concerns with I guess the anarcho-capitalist idea, I feel that once the government would be hypothetically abolished, and there's obviously debate over whether or not it should be abolished or not, but assuming it would be abolished, okay, I just feel like the uh, the power wouldn't it would become decentralized, but it would just go to those with the highest capital and those who already own property. So it's like if
Power
tax.
to do what? Power to do what?
Well, okay, here's an example. Like when I view taxation, you pay taxes to live in the United States, right? Well, let's assume the United States government, federal government, kind of got abolished. So then people
Yeah,
with
but you can't abolish the government.
okay, well
It doesn't make any
okay,
sense to
well
say that.
let's minimize it to where it has a few jobs, and one of those jobs is the non-aggression principle, right? So you can't uh, interfere with someone's property rights, basically. Would you agree with that?
Right, and I am not. I sometimes call myself an anarcho-capitalist, refer to my position as anarcho-capitalism. I am not actually an anarcho-capitalist. I have a very clear, distinct set of duties. I believe a state should exist, and it should be constrained to these duties. I believe that as individuals, if we have the right framework, we will naturally constrain it to those duties, and it will become shameful for anyone to try to exceed those duties once everybody once everybody looks at their hands and sees all the blood on them. But I've got to show them. I got to keep showing them their hands.
Well, I agree with you that some services. I think you're right about the DMV, the road thing. I would say you're right about that. With the amount of taxes they take already from people in California, like I just don't see it. They take a lot of money. They take a shitload of money, I don't know exactly what it all goes back into. I say a lot of social programs.
would it be okay for them to ask us to register? Well, I've got a lighter, right? Now, or I've got this. Ooh, this is dangerous. This is dangerous. Now, with all these gas stations around, we really ought not allow citizens to have fire-making devices. Because, Jesus, I mean, anybody, millions of people around, any one random person could just go to a gas station at any moment, fill up 40 gallons of gasoline, carry it into the middle of the city with a couple of these things, and start a massive conflagration and burn the whole fucking city to the ground. We cannot possibly allow people to have lighters and matches and stuff. Fire is not something that is safe for the average citizen to be using. Are you insane? We need to have this heavily regulated. This is one of the most dangerous inventions of all time. Heavily, heavily regulated. The notion that average person can be trusted to use something that can burn up the entire city or an entire forest is insane. Oh, wait.
One of the okay, I agree with that line of reason. We can't ban lighters because the possibility of someone might burn a forest down or something. I think that reasoning is sound. But
So
what
what
else?
about this? Then why can we then compel people to register their car on the grounds that it might be used in a crime, I guess? That's the thing. What is the grounds for that? Is there any limit to that which we can be compelled to register? Does there need to be some idea of why? Like, does it need to constrain to some sort of principle? Does it need to be constrained by some sort of principle? Or what?
I feel like I don't know enough about the DMV to argue for it. Like what you say right now sounds sound to me. It sounds logically sound, and I want to agree, but I feel like I don't know enough about the DMV to argue the other side. That's kind of what prevents me from agreeing completely.
Well, I mean, my point is we could argue all day about whether or not it produces good outcomes. And this is why utilitarianism is bad. Because I would ultimately win that util argument, but I would lose the war in the process. Because I would be conceding that's how we should evaluate things. We should evaluate them on whether or not our interpreted net outcomes are positive, whether our predicted net outcomes are
Do you
positive.
think after a
We should,
certain point when the net outcome is obviously more positive, or do you think after a certain point if the predicted outcome would be way more beneficial, that then we should prefer the utilitarian mode of ethics?
well, first of all, I have to hear that instance. I haven't heard it yet because what all utilitarians do, what all pro-statists do, is they refuse to calculate in the impact calculus the people who are harmed by the enforcement of the law. So, for example, they'll tell you seatbelt laws work. Seatbelt laws work beautifully. The number of fatalities has gone down by blah, blah, blah percent since then. Well, number one, they're not considering the fact that cars are way safer now in general, and that, the airbag might have saved them anyway. And maybe it wasn't the seatbelt that saved them, it was the airbag. Airbags have also come into cars since the seatbelt law, so there's no compelling reason to think the seatbelt law is responsible for the decrease in fatalities. Okay, that's number one. But even if it is, what we don't have numbers on, but we know the numbers are very, very large, are the numbers of people who got seatbelt tickets, or more likely, more importantly, the people who had an outstanding ticket for something previously, and a bench warrant for them. Got pulled over for a seatbelt violation, and they ended up going to jail. Why? Because they had a bench warrant and they didn't pay their previous ticket. And this guy's broke, so he can't make the bail. He has to stay in prison over the course of the weekend. And, L.A. County jail is not any place you want to ever go, I am sure. I've never been there. But I'm quite sure you don't want to go to L.A. County jail.
I'm sure there's some interesting individuals there. There's a lot you can learn from the people there, I'm sure.
Okay, well, fine, Zach, but I bet you don't want to get kidnapped at the roadside by armed men and locked in a cage for the weekend because you weren't wearing your seatbelt.
I agree
Now,
with that.
the
I think,
statists will
yeah.
tell you, no, he wasn't locked in there for not wearing a seatbelt. He was locked in there for not paying that previous ticket. And I'll say, yeah, well, see, that's what happens, right? You don't want to count those impacts. You don't think that matters. You don't think that guy's um, being subjected to an armed kidnapping and caging matters. You don't think that counts in the impact calculus, but it absolutely does. Every time we pass some little traffic law, it gives the cops yet another reason to pull people over. And yet another chance that somebody's going to not have something paid, have a bench warrant, and end up being subjected to serious costs and inconveniences in their lives. And the punishment you can get, it's not for the offense, right? It's for not complying. So the ticket itself might only be $82, but if you don't comply with their coercive, insistence that you pay them, then you get in really big trouble. Then that's a problem. Now look, the thing you did, that's not actually a problem. You only have to pay us $80. Oh, you're going to give that to the victim? Well, no, we're going to keep it. Well, why? For whom are you achieving justice? Well, you see, we have a rule that says you can't do that, and you did it, so that means we get to fine you. Okay, well, I know you were able to because you have the guns, but my question is, are you a pack of armed robbers, or are you interested at all in justice? In other words, does it matter to you whether the law is fair or just or in accordance with our fundamental principles, or does it only matter to you that it is effective at generating revenue?
Yes, the former should definitely be preferred.
Well, there's one other thing I will say, which is this. In my presidential campaign, my core message is not to destroy government, not to,
Do you think there should be
not
regulations on corporations, or do you think
what kind. It depends. There should be environmental regulations for sure. That's one of the jobs of government. In my presidency, Congress will be constrained to Section 8 of the Constitution. Any legislation that I deem not consistent with Section 8 will not be signed by me.
what's Section 8?
Section 8 is the part of the Constitution that says that lists the enumerated powers of Congress and the stuff that federal government is permitted to make laws about. It's a very concise list. It includes the post office, it includes copyrights and patents, high seas pirates, like pirates on the high seas, dealing with them, treaties. It includes minting coins. It includes counterfeit laws. It includes Captain! It includes maybe one or other, declaring war, making a navy, raising an army for a period of no more than 2 years. We're prohibited from having a standing army, which we just ignore. And then the last one, the great bugaboo, interstate commerce. The Constitution affords Congress the right to pass laws regarding interstate commerce.
What's interstate commerce?
Basically, it means back in the day, if you wanted to ship something from California to, back in the day there wasn't even California, but it was transportation was really slow, so it was unusual for one state to have trading partnerships with other states. People mostly consumed locally made goods, and so it's basically saying the clause is designed to prevent the states from making tariff laws on other states. So it basically it's designed to say states are prohibited from saying, oh, Wisconsin, you have to pay a 10% tariff on your cheese if you want to sell it in California. States are not allowed to do that. And because states are not allowed to do that, the Constitution says if that has to be dealt with, the federal government gets to do that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think there should be tariffs between states trading. Do you think there should be
Right.
tariffs on multinational companies.
Well, hold on. I want to stay on the interstate commerce thing for a second,
Okay.
because obviously, you're right. There shouldn't be tariffs between states, and that's silly. And it seems perfectly reasonable the federal government should be in charge of that sort of thing. The problem isn't interstate commerce. The problem is the courts that have interpreted everything to be interstate commerce. And the clearest and most shocking example of it is the case of the medical marijuana with Reich versus Gonzalez, where the Supreme Court ruled that even though she was a medical marijuana patient, growing marijuana in her backyard for her own consumption, never going to sell it, never going to leave her backyard or her home, that federal government was empowered by the Constitution to pass laws about that because that was interstate commerce. And it was interstate commerce because it was foreseeable that said growing of medical marijuana might have an impact upon interstate commerce. And even that, to me, is not even foreseeable. But even before entirely foreseeable, it could have an impact on interstate commerce. If everything that has any potential impact on interstate commerce is interstate commerce, then the federal government can do anything it wants. It's not constrained at all.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, I guess the definition of the semantics of interstate commerce would have to be rather strict. You have to have a clear identified
Right.
what interstate commerce completely entails.
They couldn't possibly anticipate that, though.
Yeah.
The people that wrote the Constitution, they couldn't anticipate that what to them was clear as day. Interstate commerce means we know, hey, Mississippi, you have been trying to put a tariff on Virginia, haven't you, again? We've been yelling back and forth at each other about this all of these days recently. So when we write down interstate commerce in the Constitution, we know exactly what the fuck we mean. We're talking about this shit that's going on right now, you know?
Yeah, I think, it's definitely...
But, you know, when states stop doing that, they at some point states are like, yeah, well, of course we don't want tariffs on each other. That's ridiculous. My brother lives right across the river. It's right there. Forget that. That's nonsense. We're not going to have tariffs on you. Then the federal government no longer needs that power. It no longer has to fight against anything that's potentially going to happen that's bad. So, but instead of just instead of having like a vestigial power, like the same thing with their laws about pirates on the high seas. Okay, well, how often does Congress take advantage of that power? You know, let's make some more anti-pirate laws. From now on, within American national waters, any boat that has on board a person who says "yar" will be arrested. You know? But it doesn't use that. But what it didn't do, what the courts didn't do, is then say, oh well, since you're not using that for anything real, let's call, you know, laws about lawn bowling high seas piracy.
Yeah, the definition is.
My point is, if the courts are gonna interpret the words of the Constitution to mean exactly the opposite of what they mean, then the law is not legitimate.
I would agree with that.
I mean, I have a plan to go in. If I ever go to court on like an infraction or anything, I'm going to say, this court has a burden to respect and apply legal precedent from judges and rulings in similar cases before, especially higher court judges and higher court rulings. I have a ruling here from the Supreme Court, and I want you to apply the precedent of the reasoning used in the Reich versus Gonzalez case, which shows us that in order to be something, a thing must only affect that other thing, potentially. Now, my point, sir, judge, is that running that stop sign potentially could be foreseen to have some impact, maybe, on self-defense case somewhere. Therefore, by running that stop sign with self-defense, you must throw out this case immediately. It's justified. That's self-defense from what? Ask Scalia, Judge. Ask him to explain why this reasoning works, but it is the precedent here, so you must apply it, or you are in violation of your own fundamental legal principles. They're not going to buy it, of course, but I'm going to make them fucking explain it to me as to why that's not the case. Well, okay, well, what precedent are you applying here then? What precedent says you don't have to apply precedent? Can you cite the precedent, please? You know?
So what you're saying is, you're going to be my lawyer if I get in trouble, right? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah. 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 It, here's the thing. They're in trouble because it's got to be teetering at this point, right? The deeper we get into history, the more legislation piles up, the more parsing happens, the more distinguishing between many little variations of circumstance to say the law applies this way in this circumstance, this way in that circumstance, this way in the other circumstance. The tax code is biao, right? Progressive tax code is biao, and it increasingly becomes impossible to justify. For the reason I just said.
If you start from
How can you,
the framework of the rights that we've laid upon our foundation of our law, I think you're right about that.
but even if we don't, if we just apply their rules, it becomes impossible to justify. So how do we, why is this application of law here legitimate, more legitimate than some other use of force? And the reason is because it follows the procedures of law. It displays, it's one of the institutions of democracy. But it gets its legitimacy from applying the law equally to all parties, of removing from the law sentiment and emotion, purportedly, in exchange for consistency and fair and equal application of the law. Now, consistency is not done according to principle with the law. So there's no point in going in there and arguing it's inconsistent with moral principles. And it's not adjudicated according to consistency with justice either. You can't say, this is the criminal justice system. This outcome needs to be consistent with justice. You can't make that argument. You can't make outcome-based arguments like that in court and say, I know I'm guilty of this law, of breaking this law, but even though I'm guilty of it, you shouldn't punish me because it's unethical. So just say, then the citizenry have a duty to go convince the legislators to change the law. I'm going to go in there and say, it doesn't matter what the law says, Judge. You the courts, your fellow judges, have already made that abundantly clear. The words of the law do not matter at all. So when I say running that stop sign was self-defense, I am citing sound and respected legal precedent here, Judge. And you do not have to adhere or believe or agree with me that what I'm saying is a moral issue. But you cannot, in good conscience, given the fact that your only possible claim of legitimacy is a consistent application of your own rules, reject my claims without answering them on point. And if you're just going to reject it on reasoning, your reasoning better be better. And if you're going to reject it on precedent, good. Because I am more than happy to play legal researcher and come up with, and just inundate that court with documents. I'm going to provide not 5 or 10 reasons why this case should be thrown out. I'm going to provide 100 different reasons, each of them with precedent, each with emotion, each with multiple warrants, each of which need to be responded to. Once you have them locked into their own legal mechanisms, they have to play their own game. As soon as I get in court, all my ethics stuff goes right out the window. Forget that. It's like the most arcane procedural rules imaginable, one right after another. They won't be. They will not know what the fuck hit them. People think lawyers are smart people. There are a few of them out there that are smart. A few of them. But
I don't know. I don't want to make generalizations about the intelligence of lawyers, but I'll leave that to you to do
I,
so.
I think you should, because listen, they're part of this thing too. Okay, I'm talking about criminal lawyers. Okay, prosecutors are definitely evil, but I mean, well, not necessarily the lawyers, but the all the people who are working in the courts as part of the criminal justice system that process and execute these protocols that cause people to go in there, stand in front of a judge, the judge shakes his finger at them and sends them away to jail or whatever. They're obviously not intelligent people, or they would stop and go, "What the fuck are we doing?"
Well, I think that yeah, I would see it as as unethical. I've read a lot about well, I haven't read a lot, but I've read a little bit about lawyers, criminal lawyers who they just get so fed up with the system because they just continuously run into uh, strange barriers and inconveniences that prevent them from obtaining any sort of ethical, lawful system or just system would be better than lawful. How long has this
Well,
video gone on?
yeah, we got way off topic. Let's take it back to Metasoap briefly, and maybe if you want to send me the file, I'll edit it. Okay. Um, let's do Metasoap justice here and talk about this issue because I've got some sort of self-criticisms I want to make and see what you think about it. All right, so I was fairly harsh on her in that video. I don't think relentlessly harsh, but I did turn on a little bit of the contempt, which is one of my emotions. And
Really, the only
I
thing
don't
I
know.
thought was like too much in the video is the indoctrination thing. Like I got in an argument with one of my friends a long time ago, and he said like a similar thing, like that my opposition to him was because I was indoctrinated, and I hate that form of reasoning. It just that was the
I
only thing I.
hate. Okay, I got you. I understand what you're saying, and I, in principle, agree with you. But the problem is, this is the one exception because actually, it's an actual accurate description of what's going on. It's become normalized. This behavior is normalized, right? So much so that we're having serious like back and forth trying to determine if we can come up with some way somehow the status quo is justified. Like
Literally debating.
the thing we're trying to find some way to go like, no, the house is not burning to the ground. This is an illusion. These are plastic flames. That heat is coming from some sort of massive industrial heater designed to fool us. I'm dreaming. I don't know, but this house is not on fire. But it is. I've yet to hear answers to what I'm saying for anybody, really. I heard good questions from you about, well, what about this? What about that? I've heard earnest and good effort pushback on the food regulation thing. Like, should we regulate restaurants?
I don't know.
And
I think my pushback was more just like, but the cleanliness, like, I don't know enough about it. Like that's the hard. That's hard for me to argue against it, and also because I feel like I mostly agree with you. So I'm trying to like play a devil's advocate over something that I don't really know anything about. So it's very difficult to come up with arguments against it.
well, see, to me, here's a good sign that I'm right. When people think I'm wrong about it, they prove that with things that don't prove that. Okay? So look here with the comment on the Metasoap left on the food thing. Where is that? Okay, I think it's in this one. Okay, so this. She says, wow, did she erase that one? I wonder if she did. And she said, all right, well, let's go down the food things here on the libertarian one and see her objections. Oops. All right, so she says, you don't care if there are rats running around the kitchen? I agree with host Zach. And she also said, she gave me some data that shows how there are a lot of people being food poisoned every year, like 19,000 food poisonings, 4,200 hospitalizations, 80 deaths among 48 million residents of 10 states, 15% of the population. Okay, the most frequent infection was caused by salmonella, and the second by Campylobacter. All right, so she's providing these data. Well, point number one, this data is useless because it doesn't compare the rates of food poisoning before and after the regulatory program was implemented, right?
That would definitely,
And
yeah,
we
I would
probably
say
don't,
that would definitely be needed. Yeah.
and I don't think we have that data, frankly, because they've been doing some sort of regulation on this for a while. But number two, um, pointing out the fact that there's still food poisoning despite the fact that we have regulation only proves the regulation is not working.
Well, then
I mean,
with that, that would just mean that perhaps we need to reform the regulation as opposed to just abolishing it.
okay, but see, and this is the third part.
Okay.
Implicit in this is the indoctrination I'm talking about. There's an assumption that we need to do something about it. But when she says, I'm okay with rats running in the kitchen, nobody's thinking about other human beings as being like themselves. Now, if Metasoap owned a restaurant, I bet you she wouldn't need a government minder to prevent rats from running around the kitchen. She wouldn't say, oh, the government's gone away, let the rats out again. You can let the rats out, the government's gone. Rats
Yeah,
run around
but
the kitchen,
I feel like
food all over the place.
the more successful businesses, they're going to find ways they can, uh, I guess, get the most profit from what they're doing, and they could find ways to
And,
wait, go on.
and so letting the restaurant become infested with vermin is a good idea? That is not a sound business plan in any way, shape, or form. There is no way that makes your business
Well, I'm
more
not
profitable.
necessarily talking about brand.
Now,
I'm
you
talking
might
about
say,
like buying like food that may not be exactly healthy, or maybe it's artificially made or something that needs to pass some
okay,
sort of standard.
well, what I would say to that is the only kind of businesses that do that are your big corporate chain businesses. That family run, individually owned businesses, the person's in that business for a reason. I'm in coaching debate not because, well, it's just something to do. It's because I'm a good debate coach. It's my calling, right? If somebody wants to open a restaurant, it's not just like, well, let's see, what are we going to do? We're going to open a fishing tackle store, a restaurant, a gas station. I know, coat store. Okay. No, I mean, there's some. That's not how businesses start, right? It's not like somebody says, today I'm going to start a business and then decides what it's going to be. What happens is they have some skill and some behavior that lends itself to structuring differently to make money off of it. And then they do structure it in that fashion, and that's how the business starts. Now, such a person who's probably started their business by like making tamales at home in the kitchen and selling them to friends and family, and then maybe getting some internet orders and delivering them, and finally build up a nest egg, and now they've got their own little spot and they're making their little restaurant. That's what the fucking restaurants are like. That's and family restaurants are like that. That lady is not going to let rats run around her kitchen. And I mean, the idea that somebody has to be minded, checked on by an authority figure to fulfill their their basic duty to be a human being and care about a little bit about other people is absurd. If that were the case, why aren't they minding me when I'm using fire?
Okay, well, let's say I'll concede with the restaurant thing. All right. What about what about businesses who sell food to markets? Do you think they should have some sort of regulations to make sure the food they're selling isn't somehow deficient in some area? or it is at least
Well,
still
I
kept
mean,
well?
I think the if we don't have any regulations, that there will be a period of adjustment in which some bad outcomes occur. Okay, there will be some food poisoning outcomes and stuff like that. But the fact is, the bigger the business, the less it can afford action. Civil juries love to punish big corporations with massive settlements against them. And there's lots of reasons why corporate America wants to standardize everything that are efficient.
You're breaking up pretty bad. I have to repeat some of the stuff you just said. I'm not sure if you can still hear me.
Of the cost.
Wait, can you hear me now? Oh,
Yeah, I can hear you. The big corporate businesses, those are the ones who are best able to bear the additional costs of regulation and minimum wage and all this other stuff, right? All these regulations do. The most important thing that they do more than anything else is make it more difficult to enter the market as a capitalist competitor. Vastly more. Make it very difficult to compete against the big guys if you're in certain businesses.
well, okay. If you want to prioritize some sort of law where infantile businesses are prioritized over the bigger corporations and stuff, right? So is that what the argument you're making? That it'd be easier for infantile businesses to come in and be more or have competition against the bigger businesses with the. It would be harder for them to do that with higher regulations. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that the government's actions designed to protect workers, which are substantial actions to protect workers, they take their currency from some place. And the place they take it from is entrepreneurship. People are not necessarily happy with how they spend their day. You have not experienced it yet, I don't think, but I experienced a little bit of it. Almost everybody experiences some of it. Having a job you hate and going there for 6 or 8 hours a day,
I once
day
worked at
after day.
McDonald's for 2 days and quit.
Did you hate it?
Oh yeah,
Did
oh
you
yeah,
hate it?
yeah. But the only reason I quit is because I pulled an all-nighter and I didn't want to work for 8 hours, and I was young. I was like 15, and I didn't realize I could just say I couldn't come in or something happened. I just called and was like, "Oh, I can't come back," and they were just like, "Who is
It's
this?"
funny.
No, I'm joking. But but yeah, I did actually quit after 2 days. It was pretty funny. Uh, but what's the reason I asked that? If the reasoning behind that is or the regulations that they have and the laws they have to help out workers, if it ultimately hurts infantile businesses in coming to fruition and entering the competition between bigger companies, right? Uh, that if you were going to prioritize the economic development of infantile businesses, then
Well, we call them infantile. And we're not talking about just brand new businesses. I'm talking about the ability of small businesses in general to compete against large corporate entities.
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And,
Well,
and, yeah,
okay.
go ahead.
This kind of ties back into what I was saying earlier about the multinational companies and tariffs. Do you think that we should have? I know that this is kind of against the free market, and actually Gary Johnson has criticized Trump on his protectionist policies because of this, because Trump says he's for the free market, but he wants to put tariffs on like China and stuff and importing goods. Um, Protectionist policies usually protect smaller businesses like that and help them develop um, economically to be able to compete with the bigger multinational companies. Do you think that's good or no?
Uh, no, I don't think tariffs are good. I think tariffs are entirely bad. I think that we do have a reality in which you've got two very different kind of entities doing business. And I don't know if the distinction is made in the law very as well as it should be. Because, you know, if I want to, it's very easy for me now to do business with somebody in England. Well, you want to buy this? You're going to pay me over the internet, and I'll, you know, it's easy to do business with somebody far away now as an individual doing business with another individual. And again, the thing is about the small businesses getting in and about the tariffs as well. I want to stress that I am not saying we got to reduce regulation because that'll help the small businesses get into the market. I'm saying one of the happy side effects of
Reducing regulation is that it happens.
yeah, because here's the thing. When you think about it, when we reduce it to individuals, and the problem is government allows us to on an actual action individual level, but on a metaphysical level, to diffuse responsibility for a given action or behavior such that the subject becomes the government or they, and there's no actual human being who can be held responsible for anything. So this is one of the reasons why government so desperately needs to be one of enumerated powers, not lists of things they can't do, but a short list of things they can do. But it has to be, for it to work, you got to actually treat the words as meaning what they say they mean, a little bit.
I agree.
So what do we do about it now? Well, I mean, what we do about it now is we get everybody in the habit of thinking a little bit differently. So we don't say, oh, we should maybe pull back on regulation a bit to give the small business a bit of a chance. No, we should be thinking, hi, Bob. Can you please explain to me why you are here telling me what to do?
And then, depending on, it's the burden's on them to justify what they're doing, as opposed to they have some sort of
Yeah,
innate.
and what are their justifications? Their justifications are utilitarian claims. But as you see, what happens when I try to actually turn the order of operations the way it should be. People are either willfully non-responsive or potentially don't even get the concept. That's what I mean by indoctrinated and so normalized is this behavior. When we say, oh, well, we should maybe cut back on regulation a bit, we're presuming the right to regulate the behavior of others. And all of these regulatory behaviors, remember, they're never about ourselves. They're always about somebody else. Zach, if you open a restaurant, would you allow rats to run around in the kitchen?
If they pay rent, then they have the positive
Would you
right
be,
for me to protect their existence.
okay. Now, let's say it's your own kitchen. Should you be allowed to have rats running around your own kitchen?
Yeah, if it's my own kitchen, yeah.
Okay. Now, if you own a business, isn't that your kitchen?
Mm, well, the reason I said yes in my own kitchen is that, well, I guess you would still, yes, you do have the right to have it in your own business, but the next part of the argument would be that in a free market, then people are going to see the rats, they're going to be like, I'm not going to that motherfucker's kitchen, and I'm going to go to this restaurant.
But the more like satisfying perhaps answer is yes, the restaurant does have a
Yeah.
contractual obligation to fulfill certain basic assumptions that any reasonable person could reasonably assume. Now, I'm eating here. I don't need to ask you, hey, do you have rats running around the kitchen? It's fair for me to assume that you don't. And if you do, then you're breaching in some way your contract with me because you shouldn't be open when it's like that. Now, I personally, I think the best way to police that is a different course of action. Is to change how people think about it a
Well,
bit.
first, First, you say that the state doesn't have a right to regulate, but then you're saying that now that the restaurant has a contractual obligation. How does
Well,
that?
sure. Well, because the customer and the restaurant are doing business together. That confers positive rights. Or any business transaction necessarily confers positive rights. That's the definition of a business transaction.
Mhm.
And the two people are obligated to one another. But those are civil obligations. They're not criminal obligations.
Yeah, but without regulations, they would definitely have the right to have rats running around their kitchen. You would have. It's just they wouldn't be able to impose on your negative rights to walk in the back and look for rats,
Well, no,
which would
no,
be a
they would
huge
be. It's
inconvenience.
their property. They could prevent that if they want. What I'm saying is, if you went in, if you got sick at the restaurant, then you could go in there and say, um, I have a absolutely implicit contractual expectation, reasonable expectation to receive food that doesn't hurt me. We all agree on that. That they have breached contract right there if they feed me bad food, regardless of why it's bad. But Judge, the reason why I'm asking you, or jury actually, jury, the reason why I'm asking you to assign a lot of damages here in this case is because these fuckers have rats running around the kitchen. And everybody in the jury box gasps. And that business now belongs to the guy who got food poisoning there because rats were running around the kitchen. That may not be worth a great deal at that point, but whatever wealth that restaurant has accumulated, basically in the pockets of Mr. Rat Food Poisoning guy, and that business is vilified. So even if you are sloppy by nature, even if you're somebody who cuts some corners and stuff,
Well, isn't that government regulations though to have some sort of system where it's like to identify that it is a that you're there is a contractual right there that they deserve
no,
clean food,
no, the contractual right has nothing to do with the government. That exists outside the government.
but the
The
government's
government's
there
job, though,
to actualize it.
no, yeah, well, that's one of the legitimate jobs. It's to provide the judicial system that
Okay, I
is
see.
the civil system, which enforces contracts stuff,
Hmm.
and then the criminal system, which punishes rights violations. That's government legitimate job to do that. Their legitimate job is to police the free market to keep it free, not to regulate to prevent people from doing things, but stuff like this. No, you can't have a monopoly on this. Like the federal government should step in and say, "Oh, city of New York City, are you crazy? Did you just try to sell taxi licenses to taxi drivers to allow them to drive people around the city in taxis? Oh, no, 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 no. Mind you, I want one of those city officials in jail over this. What you just did there was violate the rights of nearly 14 million New York City taxi drivers."
So yeah, that's one of the justifications where the government would have a would you consider that a right? They would have that right then to
No, the government has powers and government has obligations, and that's it. Okay, those are the only two things
so
government
they would then
has.
have the power
Government,
to.
the federal government, in my model, the federal government absolutely has the power to police state governments and even city governments
Isn't
because they
policing just
have,
conferring a duty though, which is what a right is?
no, policing means using, they have the right to coerce.
They
The
have
federal
conferred an
government,
obligation.
yeah, well, yeah, you're right, not the right to coerce. They have the obligation to fulfill certain duties, and they have the power to legitimately coerce. Okay? And so the question is, when is the power to legitimately coerce used legitimately? And when is it not used legitimately, in which case it's not legitimate coercion? Okay, and my point is, absolutely, the federal government is legitimate in using its power to police state governments by coercing them with threats of force to change their policies.
And the state governments would be gathering the taxes. The local governments would be gathering the taxes to pay for the small federal government that exists.
Yeah, the money would go up in that fashion, correct.
Well, then wouldn't they have the positive contractual right then to use power?
Who?
The government,
Because they're paying us for it?
because we're paying them. We're paying them for their
And that
pollution.
gives us the right. That doesn't give them the right. That gives us the right. We're paying them. They're getting something. We get the right to something in return.
So we have a positive contractual right to their coercion?
We have a positive contractual right for them to fulfill their obligation to use coercion to constrain lower levels of government from violating the rights of citizens and or the rights of even lower levels of government. So if like the
So if I
state
go to
government is being
McDonald's
oppressive
and
to the
I pay
county government,
money for a Big Mac, then I have a contractual right to that Big Mac, but they don't have a contractual right to my money.
you already gave them the money.
So they didn't have a right to receive that though. Well,
Not
I'm
until
trying
you
to.
gave it to them. Not until you gave it to them. It depends which kind of restaurant you go to, right? If you go to McDonald's, you pay first. Then you have the right to the Big Mac because you've already paid them. If you go to Denny's, they serve you the food first. Then they have the contractual right to the money because you've already eaten the food.
Okay, I see. I get what you're saying. Yeah, then we would have the positive contractual right for their obligation to power.
We have a positive contractual right to have the government fulfill its obligation to use coercion against state governments to prevent them from forcing me to wear my seatbelt, for example. So the federal government should be, as soon as that law in California passes, the federal government should be sending a letter to the state of California, the governor and stuff, saying cease and desist, or we will send the National Guard. That is a legitimate use of force, and they should be coercing. And you see, when I'm making the argument that yes, we should use coercion, I will always do the honest thing, unlike everybody else. I'll say, I believe we should implement this policy. It will involve coercion and violence. Here are the circumstances in which this coercion and violence will occur, and here are the justifications for it. That's how you know I'm making better arguments than these other people.
Well, all the arguments you've made sound pretty logically sound. I've been trying to attack them too, in the past like 20 minutes or so.
And if we can just, here's the thing. I think this is the idea I want to spread more than any other idea in the entire world. If I could just get somehow, like, have this be the new Icebox Challenge, right? To get people, everybody goes to DMV when they go to the window to say, I'm sorry, I didn't order your product. Can you please remove me from your mailing list?
Or make steps to make it shameful to work at the DMV, basically.
Well, make steps to get people to actually think about what's happening here. I don't want your product. That'd be easier, right? Can I opt out, or will I be subject to violence? Then they think a little bit.
Well, I guess, yeah, then they would, I don't think they would know how to respond to that, as evident by the video that you posted.
Well, when I got stuff to go back and do my research, because they didn't do it right last time. They weren't able to do it. So when I go back, I'm going to say, are you serious? This is what I get? You are trying to sell me a rectangular paper and a colorful sticker for $300? Do you get any customers in here for that? How do you get all these customers in here? Who would want to buy this for $300? I'm trying to drive home the point. Oh, we're forcing you. We're forcing you. That's how we get you to do this. People don't think about it, right? The government right now is forcing me to pay them $300 for the privilege of having a car.
It is kind of funny when you put it in that way. But I guess Metasoap was trying to argue that, or her point was that the reason they make you pay that is so you can use the roads, right? That was her argument.
Well, I guess her argument was basically, but you've not established, Eric, that they don't need those funds to build the roads.
Oh, okay. So she's asking you for evidence that they don't need it.
But that's not the problem with it. The issue isn't whether or not they need it.
I wish she'd come and discuss it with us. I know she's like big on her privacy and stuff.
This is super important, though. It doesn't matter whether they need the money to build the roads. First of all, that notion that they need that money to build those roads is misrepresenting reality, in which there's lots of different ways to fund things, and you found one. You found the point in question is this particular revenue stream that you established. Is it an acceptable thing for government to do? That's the point in question.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter how much we need the roads that money's currently being spent on, or how much we need that money, because both those are false metaverses. They're false metaverses. It's like we don't need the money. The sentence doesn't even mean anything. Well, we need that particular, however many billion dollars from that particular revenue stream to build that road, because that's currently what they say we're using it for. It just doesn't make any sense. And talking about how bad a problem is, or how much we need to address something, is if I've already pointed out successfully that there's no distinguishing attribute that we can point to between a guy with a bunch of tattoos and a ski mask and a gun and a knife running up on you in the park, pushing you down, stealing your wallet, and saying, "You're lucky I didn't cut your throat, bitch," and run off with the money. There's no distinguishing. If they cannot establish some reason for legitimacy for this particular protocol that distinguishes it from that act, right? Well, it's okay because of the law, is what you would expect them to say. It's funny that people just don't default to that. Well, it's okay because that's the law. I think people are a little bit more advanced than they used to be, and most people now realize that that's not a justification for a behavior.
I think that's logical.
It can't possibly be, or else you could absolve yourself of any and all moral responsibility.
There kind of needs
following the law.
Like you said, like a reform of, instead of us asking what powers should the government not have the right to, we should be asking what powers should they have, and looking at it through that lens, looking at it through the rights framework that our country, our constitution is built upon.
And we need to stop talking about how government's gonna. We need to stop talking about the need for government to solve problems, and start talking exactly about how the government can behave in ways that adhere to some kind of a principle. If we don't have a constraining principle, then the whole thing's arbitrary. The reason you're in jail and I'm not is because the cops don't like to pull me over, and you're a youngish black male. People think that's racism or something. No, that's what happens when we don't build the law from core principles, but rather from
the way it is now allows arbitrary manipulation for things like that.
It allows anything, because it's utilitarianism. Utilitarianism always allows anything. I can build a really strong case to predict any sort of set of outcomes. Yes, if we do this, the following things are going to happen. Here's a bunch of really good reasons why I say the following things are going to happen. So that's why we're going to...
It's very easy to...
So your predictions, that's why we're going to commit violence? Because of your predictions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The violence is certain. The outcomes are interpreted. They're created. Like, oh, there's a strong correlation. Well, there was this other program that contributed too. But yeah, it sort of worked. Or, like, even me, when the counter argument is interpretive too. Like, the war on poverty didn't work at all, because it's still the same people in poverty. But they keep raising what poverty is. So actually, it may have worked. But it probably wasn't that. It was probably unrelated to that. The thing is, what we do have a considerable amount of evidence to show is that when the government intervenes in the economy to shore up something, the economy simply adjusts to adjust prices and everything around that interfering thing. So it's like if the government decides to give for house purchases, they give a certain kind of rebate thing, right? Or like money thing. Except what ends up happening instead is it doesn't help anybody get a house better because the prices go up. So it's like they know, oh, well, now there's this government program that adds $50,000 to this pool. So let's still charge the same amount and get that $50,000. Well, of course that happens. It's the only logical response to it.
That makes sense.
So, I mean, this is the thing. The assumption of solvency is so appalling. If I'm telling people we should get rid of food stamps, their response is, but there are so many millions of Americans who need these food stamps, who depend on these food stamps to put food on the table, stuff like that, right? They depend on these food stamps to put food on the table. Are they going to starve if they don't have food stamps? Are they going to starve? Have we had starving people in America lately that I'm not aware of? The fact is, people will be as resourceful as their circumstances require them to be, or they will collapse and fail utterly and become homeless or something. A certain percentage of the population will do that. However, it should be noted that in America currently, for somebody who is willing to put in some serious effort, it seems to me impossible to imagine a world in which that person could not find some way to sustain him or herself, provided he or she is able-bodied and a sound mind. Now, we do have the issue of disabled people. Well, what should we do about them? Well, you're disabled, you can't work, so too bad for you. You don't get any money. Well, yeah, it's exactly what we should do. Of course. The point being, if we stop trying to solve these problems, we discover they will solve themselves. Because the single most efficient, most effective way to organize a system of autonomous, reasoning, self-directing agents who are acting each in his or her own interests is to allow those agents to determine their own course of action in accordance with those interests, because the nature of human society is such that always, but ever increasingly more so, to accomplish anything meaningful, to live a good life, to be happy, to do what you want to do, requires you to engage in meaningful activity with other people.
Well, why couldn't we just make it to where stuff like food stamps or Medicare is only provided with when people are employed?
Provided by whom?
The
And
government.
why? But why?
Well, see, like, yeah, it goes back. I mean, I understand. Like, it goes back to the framework of you don't think there should be a welfare state at all. But if you're arguing from the position that, because a lot of people argue it that it justifies no action. Like you said, that people are resourceful insofar as their circumstance allows them to be. Then you could just say that you could just move it to where social programs such as food stamps and Medicaid are there for people who are employed. That would be the solution for that. But I think if you take it from the rights framework, it makes more sense.
I'm not saying it doesn't make any difference to me whether they're employed or not. It makes zero difference at all. I'm not saying this is bad because it's a disincentive to work. I'm saying it doesn't do anything for the very obvious reason that people are as they are. So let's say I'm able to tolerate uh, a standard of living that's fairly low and be reasonably comfortable with it, at least comfortable enough that I don't want to do anything about it. And then one month, my family starts getting food stamps. Now I have a little bit of disposable income, but I'm still apathetic. I still want to work in my low-income job. I don't really want to try that hard. I don't want to advance. I'm comfortable enough. I got a shitty little house here, but whatever. I'm just lazy. I don't know. Whatever. I just don't feel like advancing in life. That's okay. I don't have to. Now I've got food stamps. Before I was scraping by, and at a certain point, that lifestyle might start to have a spiritual effect upon me where I decide my goals are going to evolve. And now I want to maybe accomplish some things. But now instead, I get food stamps. So what used to be no disposable income and some impetus to move up a little bit in the chain, well, geez, now I don't have to buy any food. Well, dude, I'm going to get a PS4. Fuck yeah, I'm going to get a PS4. This month I got food stamps for the first time. I got like 400 extra bucks of disposable income that normally I'd have to spend on food. And, I know I'm going to get used to this, and so pretty soon it's going to be like I got no extra money. But this time I got this 400, I'm going to go get me a fucking PS4. Hallelujah. Thank you, federal government. And that's a much more realistic scenario, in my mind, than there being a family who's just like,
What if there's some study that shows that people who engage in recreational activities of playing a PS4 increases their overall productivity at their job? Would it then be okay?
no, because it's more utilitarian justifications. See, here's the thing. When we're talking about whether food stamps do not have solvency, this is just one line of argumentation I have, that they don't actually have any solvency, that we make up their solvency for the most part, okay? That to the extent that these programs have impact, we're making it up. I want you to think about Social Security as well. How old are you?
19.
19 years old. Now, according to the current federal government system of Social Security, here's what you have to look forward to. Let's say you make a shitload of money for some reason, like millions of dollars every year. The federal government, let's say you make, actually it doesn't even have to be that much. Let's say you make like $500,000, $600,000 a year. The federal government will take from your paycheck $106,000 a year, and here's the rationale for it. Listen, Zach, we're happy you're off on your own now. You're an adult now. Welcome to the workforce. Pleased to have you. Now, we regret to inform you that there's too high of a likelihood that, I don't know, 50 years from now, when you're 69 years old and it's time for you to retire, we're very concerned that 50 years from now, you won't have saved enough money for your retirement. You don't look like a saver to us. So we're going to take $106,000 a year from you and put it in our special government retirement program.
We promise we'll give it back to you when you're older, yeah.
It's a government retirement program. That's the best kind. And it's called Social Security. And we will give you back your money when you're old. And so now you're old, right? You're like 70. And you're like, well, it's a different world now, of course. And I'm not going to retire. And why would anybody want to retire? The only thing people want to retire from are jobs as employees that the government has. The way the government is, it powerfully encourages employee status and powerfully disencourages entrepreneur status. Even though the best possible way to empower people is to involve them in entrepreneurship of some sort. It doesn't have to be like you quit your job and become a businessman. No, it could be, start a little side business and see if it grows, that kind of thing. That should be the number one priority of every employee in my mind, because I don't care what personality type you are or whatever else. It can't possibly be your life's dream to work on someone else's project.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It should be your apprenticeship to work on someone else's project and learn, right? To work on a lot of, one should always be engaged in apprenticeships for one's whole life. I'm not apprenticing right now at the moment with anybody, but as soon as I find the next person who's got something really interesting to teach me, who knows a lot of shit, I'm all over it.
Would you consider me your apprentice, Eric?
I'd say that I wouldn't consider you my apprentice. I'd say you're doing I would prefer, if I were to be an employee, which you're not, but if I were, well, you are of autonomy. You're an employee of autonomy, because I paid you something. So I guess in that sense, but not formally, officially an employee. The federal government doesn't need to watch this video. The state government doesn't either. But the point is, and then you're a partial and growing owner of talking with famous people. And I told you I've got about a 5-year plan here where I'm putting all these plans in motion and I expect to see them all come to fruition in about 5 years. Now, at the end of that 5 years, I plan to see everybody who's been with me this whole time. I plan, and I am certain it's going to happen as well, they are all going to be set up so that they don't have to endure any decades of employeehood before becoming an autonomous and moving about the world individual. I'm an individual who moves about the world because I have freedom. I have freedom because I have a little bit of money to splash around. Not a lot. I'm not rich by any stretch of the imagination. But I'm operating in business levels of money rather than personal levels of money.
I think it's a very
And
good point
it's a
about the
difference.
pursuing entrepreneurship as opposed to employership all your life, you know. I think it's a very good point. That should be that should be stressed more, definitely. And with the Social Security thing, if there's going to be some sort of public education, I think it would be better to educate people on that if they want to retire, they should do that shit themselves. They should save their own money and do that shit, not let the government have the right to take it out of our paychecks because they claim it's for our better good, you know.
Well, additionally, know that you're not going to get back what you put into it at all.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You don't get anything close back to it. And I mean, here's what nobody thinks about. Consider for a second the impact on the economy. You're worrying about what's going to happen to people 50 years from now, and you are removing huge amounts of wealth from the economy in the interim that would otherwise get spent, invested, or otherwise add to economic activity and generate more wealth. You're saying, let's keep this dam here with its million teeny holes squirting out little things here, right? So that everybody gets their directed chute of water, right? Their carefully directed chute of water, and everyone's like trying to catch it. The alternative is knock this dam down and let everybody figure it out themselves and get their own fucking water. And then all of a sudden there's plenty more water around.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah, to me, all this stuff seems and increasingly so too. Remember, I have to come out of the indoctrination too. Like we all begin by being indoctrinated first to be afraid of getting in trouble. That's the number one thing we're indoctrinated with. I still have it. My daughter's got it crazy. Oh no, I'm going to get in trouble. You teach you that real early. And you got to shake that off. And then you got to realize, you got to get past how normal it is. But everybody's walking right past this thing and not even noticing it. It must not be very important. But it is. And everybody needs to notice it. So I think maybe that's part of job one is to change the argument from, well, everyone's entitled to their opinion and relativism and everyone's kind of right and some people are right. There's no right or wrong about politics. It's just your position and your opinion. You need to change that right away. My position is, if you disagree with this, if you are a statist, you are wrong. And you are maintaining an unethical, immoral position because you are advocating for violence. I have 100 fucking million hours of explaining why in me. And a shitload of really strong arguments. And I have logical consistency on my side. I can point out to you why, if we go with your argumentation approach, whatever it is, whatever justifications you have for statism, and I don't mean any kind of state. I mean some sort of state constrained by some utilitarian rule rather than an actual principle. So what I'm telling you is you're wrong. It's not your opinion. You're wrong as though you were saying the earth is flat. You're wrong as though you were saying I can jump to the top of Mount Everest on my own 2 feet. You're that wrong. And the depth of your conviction in your wrong, despite the fact that you don't really have any justification. The burden's on you to explain why you're right, first of all, like I do. But even if you don't, forget that burden for a second. Why aren't you testing this? Why aren't you testing your own model for consistency? I mean, I know I didn't for a long time too. I'm not condemning you for that. I'm trying to change that.
Yeah, that goes to, just before we wrap this up. Back to how Metasoap, she made a comment about your rantiness or something like that. The way you deliver things. Maybe it's just like an NTP thing, but I don't see anything wrong with the like I don't understand how it would better be laid out. Like it seems pretty
Well,
sound to me, you know.
I mean, here's the thing. I get that it's probably for people who are going to interpret this as some sort of a radical position, which I don't interpret as a radical position at all. I think there's nothing radical at all about respecting other people. But for those who are going to interpret it as such, she's probably right on the money in saying, to the extent that I can sound more calm, more uh, direct and authoritative, it might be helpful. However, I would also stress that, again, uh, it's the weakly chained elephants, and it's the weakly chained elephants who mistakenly believe the chain is part of their own leg. And I gotta shake it around a lot. See, it's not part of your leg.
So that was the where you refer to the elephant in that one video in the description or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, it's that analogy about, it's learned helplessness is what you'd call it. Learned helplessness, or learned lesser status. Learned lesser status is another way to put it. I've learned that somebody else is in charge of me.
Let's end on that note because it's gone for an hour and a half. But this is a really good video. We went
That's a
over some
long
really,
one.
yeah, we went over some really good stuff though. Thanks for watching Talking
I
with
hope it
Famous.
is. I feel like I repeat myself a lot, but I do feel
I
like
feel
I repeat
like
myself a
well,
lot
I
in
think
these
it's because
things
I asked the
because I
same
keep going to the
questions.
same points.
I usually ask
Well,
the
I
same
think they
questions.
need to be gone over. I think it's worthwhile to, but I mean, the problem is whatever different questions you might ask, they keep going back to the same central themes. This is why it's a superior model, because it answers all of the questions. Util doesn't do that. It doesn't explain how we decide what kind of violence is okay. And that's precisely what my model does. It's not mine. I didn't make it up. But, the one I affirm. The model I affirm does that.
Uh,
Think about
Thanks for watching
it. All
Talking
right.
with Famous People.
Cool.